You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Branke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry moving forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. I also encourage you to subscribe to our daily newsletter and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us live in the chat every Thursday. Or, hey, you'd get 2 this week, guys. I mean, you get the one on Monday and Tuesday. I mean, it's just, we're like rich with content this week.
Yeah.
They're lucky, and we're just happy to provide it. Jeff, how you doing this week?
Still good, David.
Still good. Have you gotten past the vacation slog?
Yes, but now I'm just looking forward to the weekend. So it's just trying to balance out the two.
Teetering between, huh?
Anna, have you been able to muster the energy it will take to carry this podcast on your back as you normally do?
2 times in 1 week.
So
this is what I've trained for, David. So yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, that's good. I'm looking forward to it. Just, don't want to carry so much today. But before we get started, we have a word from our sponsor, Big Commerce. And we're back. And before we get started with our first story this week, just a reminder that Big Commerce provides modern e-commerce technology that works with your existing systems. CRM, OMS, ERP, no problem. Whatever existing business tools and technologies you use today, Big Commerce can integrate using pre-built one-click integrations or customize your automation with its APIs. Make the move to Big Commerce today. See what I did there, and I switched it up by mixing up the acronyms.
Yeah, and you made it through that.
Yeah, so that way it's fresh for everybody listening.
Yep.
They're just like, oh, something new.
Thanks for not over-explaining.
I know. Let's over-explain the first story. Loose pin forced emergency FedEx landing. 3 years ago, sparks flew when a FedEx cargo plane made an early morning landing at LAX and the landing gear malfunctioned. The Boeing 767 wound up resting on the engine housing under the left wing because the landing gear on that side never extended. The pilots had to use a rope to escape the cockpit over fears of a potential engine fire warning. On Wednesday, NTSB officials said a simple pin in the landing gear came loose, and they have no idea why. The pin helps secure one end of a rod to another part on the landing gear brake assembly, and the NTSB believes it was in place when the plane took off from New Jersey. When the pin came loose, the rod got jammed in the landing gear. A mechanic who last worked on the brake assembly a month before the incident didn't recall anything unusual about the job. Anna, I mention it every time one of these stories comes up, but I'm constantly amazed how such a simple component can cause near catastrophic failure.
Definitely. And this in particular was a very unsatisfying story. Like the maintenance tech doesn't know what happened. The NTSB doesn't know what happened. What do we do with that? And also generally, like what do we do with safety investigations that take 3 years to conduct?
Right.
Some say the reason that the NTSB is so reputable and well respected is because they're so careful and thorough. They consult with a lot of technical experts. So I get that. Like, there's a lot of pressure from every side too to get it right. Like the airline manufacturer, in some cases, wants to be vindicated.
Right.
Or cleared, you know what I mean? There's sometimes litigation on the line. That can be, and when it's an issue of equipment that's maybe like what we saw with the Max, for example. There's this urgent impetus to address whatever that equipment issue is because you want to prevent problems on other planes. In this case, there is no final answer after several years, and that can feel a bit unsettling. 767s are very widely used. They're not just cargo planes. They carry passengers. They're used in military applications. They're all over the place. So yes, it would have been nice to know a little more here. I don't know what to say about it really, because that, we're just sort of left in limbo with like, well, hope it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, it's an anomaly, right? Mm-hmm. Jeff, it reminds me of when we first kind of got into the product design part of the manufacturing industry, and we're really covering, such seemingly simple components like O-rings, cotter pins, and as you're writing them up, you're like, I don't get it. Okay, it's a simple little piece of plastic. How big of a deal is it? And then you realize that if they fail, a plane can't land.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like, not to lessen the impact of this story, but it kind of feels like a 1 in a million thing. I mean, for the National Safety Board, one of the reasons they get in so much trouble, their investigations take so long. We're trying to speed them up, but they're also exhaustive. I mean, they are extremely thorough.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, I know on a Friday night you love kicking your feet up with a Boco
an NTS
Chico
beer.
or whatever the seltzer is you're drinking.
A Topo Chico and an NTS beer report.
Did you say
I'm in heaven. Boco Chico.
I thought you said Bocacino.
I have no idea what these things are. I was just blown away. We're at our softball game, and afterwards, we only had like 3 guys drinking beer, and everybody else was on these fruity seltzer things.
It was so
weird.
I was so upset because I'm like, I'm going to buy extra so I can bring them home. I brought like 2 home.
Yeah, everybody drank those.
Yeah.
It was an interesting dynamic. Anyway. Getting back to this story, it does seem like just sort of, it was just a part failure, which sometimes you cannot account for, you can't plan for. They do happen, unfortunately. I guess what it brought to my mind is a lot of these stories that I've always been really interested in, not because I understood the chemistry involved, but all these new advancements we have coming on board with new materials that are being used that are stronger. Now, in most cases, we're looking at like a titanium alloy or some sort of silicon carbide type part here. So the materials as we know it today couldn't be much better, but we're always pushing the envelope. Pushing the envelope in terms of durability, reliability, and lighter weight, which I think is a big part of everything when you're talking about aerospace. Tons of moving parts, lots of weight, and lots of fuel. That's another thing when we look at some of these different aviation fuels, when we look at electric planes potentially, we look at solar power as a potential application for aviation. All of those things come into play here because with all of those things come less weight. Less weight, less strain, fewer parts fail. Which is kind of the way it works. So I think it offers a little bit more credence to the work that's being done in all those areas. We talk a ton about 3D printing parts for aerospace. Again, situation like this, maybe that can help play a role to reduce these types of 1 in a million type things happening down the line.
Well, and Anna, this story really reminded me of the Ford Q&A that we did earlier this week because we talked about sensors going into everything to the point of monitoring how many times you use the wiper. And if you could monitor every component in an aircraft for wear and tear and predictive and planned maintenance, maybe in the future, that's something where a simple loose pin would get caught by a smarter aircraft.
You could go back through and sort of breadcrumb what happened and when. Yeah.
Well, or catch it beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you would kind of get a warning that this part might fail because it would monitor vibration in the area or something that would otherwise show that it was potentially going to fail.
Yeah.
Another thing that stood out to me, and could we just take a moment to try and wrap our brains around this, that the plane isn't required to have evacuation slides because of an exemption that FedEx received from the FAA. So I don't know if you guys caught that line where I say the pilots had to use a rope to get out of the plane, but the co-pilot lost his grip on the rope, fell to the runway, and actually broke his heel. And we know of the pilot shortage. We know of whatever it might have taken to get this pilot back on his feet. Maybe those slides might be justified a little bit now. It seemed odd to me that you have this multi-million-dollar piece of equipment, and in the case of an emergency, the pilot's got to break the glass and take a rope down that you use for a children's tree fort?
Is that what it was from? It was from the tree fort that was on the plane?
I believe they had to provide their own, and so they cut it off of their children's pre-forged, installed it using a simple chain.
Yep.
And that's why he fell. So really, it's his fault.
So why didn't they get the rope ladder?
Well, so I mean,
they should have something better than
someone actually joked about that on our website, saying, "Well, at least we know that Boeing's going to upgrade to a rope ladder, or FedEx will upgrade to a rope ladder." And it seems like whenever we talk Boeing, when it rains, it pours. Another story that came out this week is that the NTSB is also investigating an engine fire that was on a United Airlines Boeing 737 MAX after the plane landed in Newark, New Jersey. Now, hopefully that one doesn't take 3 years, but it just seems like sometimes with Boeing news, it's either all good or all bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Our next most popular story this week. Explosion destroys offshore gas platform. See, I'm going to do this one today, Jeff. I'm going to chop this way.
You're hammering.
I'm going to go this way. Last Friday, an explosion and fire destroyed an offshore gas platform in the Gulf of Mexico. 2 workers lost their lives. 8 were injured, and 1 remains missing. Petróleos Mexicanos, a state-owned oil company known as Pemex, said the workers who died were employed by a subcontractor on the gas transfer platform. Some of the injured employees were also employed by the company. It took 7 ships to evacuate more than 320 workers. The company said the platform, quote, was totally destroyed, but 4 linked platforms at least didn't catch fire. Pemex may need to stop production, which could be a bad situation for the company that is already reducing production by several thousand barrels per day. Anna, with some of these stories where there is a loss of life, it's hard to also think of the supply chain implications, but there are some real red flags here when it comes to employee safety and some real ramifications as a result and how that might trickle through the supply chain.
For sure. And I think those things are very, very much intertwined. You mentioned several thousand barrels per day. Well, Reuters reported shortly after we ran this story that Mexico's state oil company will reduce crude output by 100,000 barrels per day until the beginning of August. So that amounts to a loss of at least 2 million barrels of crude through the end of July. I think that's an important focal point from a price standpoint and how that impacts the region. But, Pemex has some other problems as it relates to their safety record.
Yeah.
And Reuters kind of went on to detail some of the severe accidents that have taken place in recent years at its facilities, including both refineries and production hubs. In August of 21, a gas leak from an offshore platform triggered a fire that killed 7 workers and caused the loss of 1.6 million barrels of oil output.
Wow.
So the government owns this company, but they're basically blaming previous administrations.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like they were passing the buck on this one.
For sure, yeah. Like for the condition of Pemex saying that they inherited this company when it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Analysts say that the company's management during the current administration has not been great either. And that their incident rate is in fact getting worse based on their own data, the company's own data. So with the numbers going in the wrong direction and lots of finger pointing taking place, I think that's a scary place to be, especially for those workers. Like if you're a worker there, it is especially scary. From a business standpoint, production losses here are dramatic for you, not in the overall oil market. 100,000 barrels a day is a drop in the bucket globally. But, if you're like at this location taking a 15% daily hit for the next, 20 days or whatever, that's serious. And outside of the human cost of what happened, there's an ROI in making sure that this doesn't happen again. But are they organized and functional enough to address that? It seems like they're not.
Definitely seems like they're not, especially when the current administration came out and said, yeah, we're bad. But man, was it so much worse before we got it. And Jeff, sometimes that's just not an acceptable answer when there's a loss of life during an industrial accident.
Never a good response. Did you see the video of this fire?
Yeah, it
Scary.
was very scary.
Frightening stuff. Yeah, you mentioned some of the economic impacts here. Pemex is kind of weird because it is a state-owned company. It's also the most heavily indebted oil company in the world.
Oh, really?
So they are not operating at a profit. So when you're already losing now about 6% of your daily output, that's a huge hit. On the day that this happened, they lost almost half of their total output, 700,000 barrels. So the economic ramifications for a company that was already faltering, which being state-owned is so strange to see that happening, these impacts are huge. Plus, you've just lost a platform. Plus, there's going to be environmental cleanup costs. Plus, any other investigations that happen because there was loss of life and there were other people injured. Now, I'm not sure where the subcontractors come into play, but how interested are they going to be in continuing to send workers to your oil platform if these are the types of situations they have to endure? I think what this also looks at a little bit in terms of when you look at safety, we've talked about this a lot in these types of incidents. There's a short term and there's a long term. In the short term, you can cut corners and save money, which if you're a company that's losing this much cash, you're probably cutting corners someplace, and it'd be a shame that it's safety, but it sure feels like it. Long term, making those investments obviously pays off, not only just in terms of you're not shutting things down, you're not losing product going out the door, but you're going to actually be able to keep and retain people and attract better workers. So I think it's a case study again in the right perspective on safety, making it part of the culture, all those things we've discussed at length previously, but it just keeps coming to the forefront over and over again. And again, Pemex is paying the price both literally and figuratively because of these incidents.
Well, it shut down every well in the area for a bit, but as a result of those 7 ships who rescued the workers, they were also dousing it with water to kind of keep the fire at bay from spreading. So really, once there was the accident, the response really helped kind of mitigate what could have been much, much worse. And when it comes to the environmental impact, this is according to the company, so with a grain of salt, but the platform is actually at a low risk for oil spill, but it might actually cause the company to burn off more gas.
I was going to say they're flaring more stuff.
Yeah. So because some wells produce gas associated with oil, either oil production is going to have to be shut down until somewhere else is found to send this gas, or they're just going to flare it off, like you said, Jeff. This is also, do you guys remember the Eye of Fire story where there was a gas leak at the bottom of the ocean that caught on fire, and then there was a giant fire at the top of the ocean that people were calling the Eye of Fire? That was Pemex. And so it's a company with not only a history of safety problems, but like viral safety problems. And really, if this is government owned, like, just get your house in order.
Yeah, and they're throwing a bunch of tax dollars at it too. It's just, there's a lot of obviously organizational issues here.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting though, because there is actually a movement to do more private energy for private energy companies in Mexico. Obviously, the government is trying to push them down, but they are picking up the slack because Pemex is kind of flattened out in terms of their production and profitability. So,
our next most popular story this week: Anchor Brewing halts operations after 127 years. Pour one out for Anchor Brewing. The San Francisco staple with a 127-year-old legacy is closing up shop and liquidating as economic conditions worsened and sales plummeted. In the 1970s, Anchor sparked the craft brewing craze after its unique brewing techniques ignited demand from beer geeks everywhere. But it's getting hard out there for brewers, as canned cocktails, crafted drinks, spirits, Topo Chicos, and wines are each taking a piece of that once whole beer pie. Brewery spokesperson Sam Singer said, quote, "We recognize the importance and historic significance of Anchor to San Francisco and to the craft brewing industry. But the impacts of the pandemic, inflation, especially in San Francisco, and a highly competitive market left the company with no option but to make this sad decision to cease operations." Anchor was sold to Japanese brewer Sapporo in 2017, and the parent is discontinuing the brand. But hope remains. Anchor has thus far failed to find a new dance partner, but someone could be lying in wait to pick up Anchor on the cheap in a liquidation sale. Anna, I know it's wishful thinking, but I feel like a brand with this sort of legacy of any other has an opportunity to find new life, still it's sad to see it go the way, kind of go out the way it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if it will. I mean, I'll be the wet blanket of this panel on this story and just say that I feel pessimistic about that outcome. And I believe, well, okay, so, you know, the commenters on our website when we posted this story, they took one thing out of this, and that was the word San Francisco.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think you have to look at this closely and realize that there really are a combination of factors here that created this problem. I know that we all know San Francisco is a very expensive place to operate. So is California, right? But it's not the only factor here, though. It seemed to be taking the brunt of the commentary.
Mm-hmm. But, well, I think it's because the spokesperson went out of their way to say, like, and inflation, especially here, am I right? He
did, but he also mentioned a bunch of other things,
right.
You know, and nobody grabbed onto that, but I think you got to look at it that way. Like there's been, you know, first of all, San Francisco, so it's not unique. We've seen like a steady deindustrialization of urban areas over the last several decades as it becomes cheaper to set up, buy real estate, pay workers in rural areas. I mean, that's just a trend across manufacturing in general, right? So I don't know. I feel like if Anchor had a sustainable and strong business, that they could and would have done that. But the added market pressures, which he also mentioned in the statement, we have discussed those at length on previous podcasts. But in summary, you know, the beer industry, especially those considered craft, they face a tremendous amount of competition from an absolute tidal wave of beer brands alone. And then obviously you mentioned seltzer, canned cocktails, all that stuff. Not to mention the fact that the younger generations just don't drink as much.
Right.
You know, they got their vape pens or whatever they're doing. I don't know. But I mean, all of that, you know, compounded is just chipping away at that market share for all of those companies. And we've said this before too, when you try to position yourself as a craft beer company, but you have national distribution, you're owned by Sapporo, like you lose some cred there. I think craft beer people want to find like the coolest, most unique, most underground stuff. And that's why craft beer is so fragmented. Mm-hmm. And so they were in a tough place and they don't benefit enough from setting up shop in a less expensive rural area. I just don't think so. My guess is they just don't have the sales to support that. Otherwise, they would have done that. So yes, maybe someone will, it's got to be like a person out there who's running a company now and has a passion for this brand, mm-hmm. right? To see this take off. I don't think that there's maybe a great business case for it.
I think yes and no, because I think that only because I think of Appalachian Mountain Brewery, which we did about 3 weeks ago, where they were a craft brewer that kind of got gobbled up by AB InBev and then wound up buying it back.
But that is so unique.
I know it's so unique, but I feel like this is a very similar case where maybe the company wasn't making enough for Sapporo to support it, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe for a small business owner, or maybe for the, some of the managers or some of the employees there, maybe they know how to run the ship and still be profitable, just not profitable to Sapporo's standards. I don't know. That's just me countering your wet blanket with a warm and close.
It's because of how close you are to the brewing industry and the product associated with it.
That's right.
Primarily.
That's right. I like to support it.
How?
By buying it for friends and loved ones.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
But no, Jeff, do you think that's something that could happen? Whereas, it could come back?
Let me be the warm, dry, cozy piece of fabric to wrap yourself up into if you are a supporter of Anchor Brewing, because I do think there is some promise here. I do think there is some opportunity. Now, the one thing I think they have working against them is they describe themselves as hyper-local.
Yeah.
That hurts, okay? Because when I think about some of these beers that have come back, I think the one that you pointed out, the Appalachian Brewing, I think that is extremely unique because they never lost their following, okay? Here, it feels like it's just a market dynamic. However, when you look at a company called Blue Ribbon Holdings, and specifically Pabst Brewing Company.
Never heard of it, Jeff.
What they did is they took a bunch of these beers they did have national distribution, but they were kind of regional favorites. Yeah. So if you look at Lone Star, Rainier, Pabst Blue Ribbon, Old Style, Stroh's, all of these they bought all of these beers. And what they did is they went to another company, which is basically a contract manufacturer, City Brewing, which has locations in La Crosse, Wisconsin, Irwindale, California, just outside of LA, and a couple of other places. And they brew all these beers there. And they can distribute them wherever they need to, because there was still a following in certain geographies for these types of beers. Now, I'm going to tell you something. The Pabst Blue Ribbon that you drink now and the one that you drank 20, 25 years ago, it's different. They changed it. They evolved it because it fell out of favor. But all of these beers have made a comeback because they found a way to do it profitably. They're taking advantage of geographic preferences and sort of just brand loyalty in nostalgia. A lot of instances. Exactly. And they've brought them back. So if Anchor Brewing really does have this core following of people that like their beers and the taste is there, it has to taste good. Okay. If it's there, I think there is a promise for it, because I think there are other entities like Pabst Brewing that will look at a brand and say, okay, we can do something with this. So I do think the glass is half full when it comes to Anchor Brewing.
Man. Puns, and you paint a beautiful picture blanket to start the story.
That was a very nice fairy tale, Jeff.
I do. Well, I gotta say,
my delusional optimism persists.
Well, no, I mean, I guess I was surprised to think of Pabst, but you make a really good case as to why it would make business sense to them. So, I mean, I think it stands a chance that it could survive. One thing that surprised me was how well known it was outside of its hyper-local location. Like when we mentioned it, frequent guest of the podcast, Andy Zoll, perked up immediately like, oh man, I love that brand. He had fond memories of drinking it when he was in the area. Other people in the office were aware, like it has name recognition that I was unaware of. And I think that that's something that you could really tap into. I
mean, this company has shown it. So, plus they have amazing merch. Like if you look on any of these individual brand websites, how many people here, did your dad have the shirt that said, I've got style, old style? I mean, when you went to a volunteer fire department in all these little towns in Wisconsin, there had to be,
that's what they're rocking.
Half the dads were wearing that shirt. So to see some of that stuff on here is kind of awesome.
Last year, even though like beer sales in total dropped 38.1% in the U.S., that's according to the Brewers Association. Craft brewer sales were still up, still higher. And I mean, again, 0.1%, but they still increased, and imports are rising as well. Now, in the interim, the company has stopped brewing, but it's going to brewing. But it's still going to package and distribute everything that they have on hand. Who knows, maybe that interim period, they gave their employees 60-day notice. They're going to help with the transition, separation packages, stuff like that. But, hey, maybe there's a Hail Mary, somebody steps in, and new life can be breathed into the old Anchor. All right, our next most popular story. Roller coaster crack may have formed 6 to 10 days before closure. The Carowinds Amusement Park in Charlotte is under investigation after a viral video showed a large crack in a column supporting the functional roller coaster. A key support beam on the Fury 325 ride, known as a Giga Coaster because it's tall, was bending with the top visibly detached as cars packed with unsuspecting passengers passed by at 95 miles per hour. Now, North Carolina's Department of Labor just found that a large crack was visible for at least a week before the ride was shut down for maintenance. Carowinds plans to fix the ride and add additional inspection procedures. The park's maintenance team and ride manufacturer, Swiss company Bolliger and Mabillard, say the fracture formed along a weld line in one of the steel support columns. The column could be replaced as soon as next week, and after the new column is installed, the park will perform accelerometer tests to measure the vibration of the structure. The ride will also run for 500 full cycles before testing, and the manufacturer and a third-party testing firm have to sign off with a final inspection. Anna, luckily, crisis was averted, but man, it is creepy to think that there was a 10-day window where this thing was flexing.
Super creepy. And I'm going to just be honest about something that's going to surprise you guys. But I'm not super into like roller coasters. And,
You don't even like roller coasters?
Well, I mean, I did when I was younger and I had no responsibilimes. But
When was the last time you were on one?
It's been a while.
See, maybe you gotta give it another go.
I don't know. Like, is now the time to tell me that? While we're talking about this story?
You can go to this amusement park's website. They have like cameras that show the entire ride. Don't do that.
No, thanks.
I mean, it made me nauseous, but
Company party at Six Flags Great America.
I will be there.
Yeah, let's kick the tires.
Meet you at Six Flags.
We'll carpool. You know what? I'll pick you up.
I'm going to be right behind you.
I'll pick you up.
Yep.
It'll be all right.
It sounds like they have a pretty good process laid out here in terms of replacing the beam. You mentioned the accelerometer test, the 500 test rides, final inspection. All that sounds like a good start. What alarmed me most here was that the crack was identified by a visitor of the amusement park, not by the park staff, which obviously begs the question, what were their ongoing maintenance practices that this was not, distinguished by someone who works there, just lying in plain sight there.
Yeah,
a little bit scary.
New maintenance has to be just look up.
Right. Well, and it just seems like, how would you identify that problem until it actually breaks if you didn't know that was there? So obviously it's a warning sign. It's pretty alarming that it went unnoticed, but they did say that they're going to try to implement some drones for inspection as part of their new procedure, which is a pretty good start. I think that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. But my second question is, this manufacturer, I don't remember the name that you said, but it's
Bolliger and Mabillard.
Yep.
Yeah, Bolliger. It's a hard G.
Bolliger and Mabillard.
Yeah, Bolliger and Mabillard.
So,
no.
So they made the original support beam, and they are also producing the replacement beam, which I know they said that they put their heads together and they figured out right away that it was this issue with the weld.
Yeah.
I just want to know maybe if something needs to change on the equipment side here, because it's been reported already that the old support column already came off and that the new one is also expected to arrive today. Mm-hmm. So they are flying through this replacement. Is that a good thing? I know they've done. I know they've done a battery of tests, but 1 week does not feel like long enough for really thoroughly going through and figuring this out, because that was a big problem.
Yeah.
That was a big crack. And, I just don't feel great about how quickly this solves, not just from a standpoint of safety, but also for your audience, your customers and stuff. Do you want to rush back there because they quick got a new one in, same manufacturer? They can tell us all day long that they have this figured out and they went through this process or whatever, but maybe it was a quick fix and a quick discovery, but geez, I'm not getting on that thing.
I think the people that aren't going to get on it because it was so fast, they're the people that aren't going to get on it anyways for a while because, of the fear surrounding the structural integrity. Whereas the other half of the people are like, nope, they said it's fixed. We're going to give it a go. I think the drones, employing the drones is really fascinating to me because we've talked about how those can be used on manufacturing facilities for sensing chemicals that might be releasing, for looking for other safety issues. So it's kind of cool to see them being employed in a legitimate application where they could make it safer. I also think, we talk about IoT and how we're putting sensors everywhere in manufacturing facilities. Really, this is another application where if you have additional sensing at these critical points, it's almost like having how they're putting more sensors on bridges where you can just see when structural integrity is going to fail. Jeff, another thing I liked about this story was being part of engineering and manufacturing publications is that when there's a problem, man, do they want to fix it. And so it's like...
What?
Well, it's just it's got to be the weld. No, the post must be sinking.
David loved this story.
No, cutting you off. Did you see this?
What?
Did you actually see this
the crack? Oh, yeah.
And what was happening when the roller coaster went around it?
Oh, yeah. No. It was, that was bad.
What do you mean we want to fix this? They were you could look at it and see. Are you kidding me?
No, sorry. It's our readers want to figure out what happened. Like they're trying to chase the root cause. Yeah.
Fair.
No.
From that perspective.
Yeah,
this was
it's terrifying.
Well, the thing is, you're reading this story, and it's all about, we're taking these steps, and we're going to run through 500 cycles and make sure everything's good before we let anybody near this, and we'll make sure it's okay. And I'm thinking, all right, they're being diligent about it. Then I see the video of the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how'd you miss it?
Are you kidding me?
I know.
This is, and I'm sorry if this is kind of gross, but what it reminded me of is when your kids are little and they get baby teeth. They have the baby teeth coming out, and they're super loose, but they will not let you touch them to pull it out, and it's just hanging there. That's what this looked like.
A baby
This
tooth.
was horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, how anybody could get on this ride, how anybody could justify running this roller coaster is beyond me.
I don't think people knew though. They didn't see it,
Man, if you watch the thing go around once, there's no way you couldn't see this.
But from your vantage point as a person getting on it, you probably
wouldn't want to get on it to begin with.
You probably can't see it. No, I would never get on it. No, but
as a person who would get on it, like, I mean, there's a 10% chance as I'm watching it, like maybe you're looking at that one part because it's a huge coaster too.
Fair enough.
And I mean, normally I come out on the side of there are too many phones out and everyone's just constantly on their phone recording things rather than living in the moment, where this is actually a good example of somebody who just happened to be recording it and caught it.
The fact that this took a week to shut
10
down
days,
is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, I was expecting to see, okay, there's a crack, but nothing's moving, nothing's shaking. It's wobbling.
Yeah.
And you're going up when you hit this seam.
Yeah.
It's beyond defense.
But think about
what?
Okay, so think about Six Flags, right? Do you remember going on that American Eagle maybe in our 20s when that was a legacy ride? And it's still functional, so it's got to be safe, right? But man, when you're on it, you're just like, I don't know. This seems like some real first-gen technology.
Well, it's wooden, so I mean, there is that. And I'm not a roller coaster fan to begin with, but I get it.
It's another knock against our work party at Six Flags.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah. We'll meet you there.
Yeah.
I'll pick you both up.
Well, the other thing, I think there was some pressure at this park. First of all, for these, maybe with these types of things, the thing was shut down all through 2020. Yeah. So you think a lot of these types of businesses have to be feeling some pressure to recoup. I'm sure they're still feeling the effects and people not coming back.
Fair.
But I would be with you 100%. This is where making some investments in some very simple sensors, some cameras, whatever you want to call them, or maybe just a guy with binoculars checking this stuff out could have definitely helped them, because if they're already dealing with some of those economic pressures from being shut down that much, this isn't going to help.
No, I mean, it's just more diligent maintenance staff, honestly, at a base level would catch something like this. And while there are economic pressures, an amusement park never has an economic pressure to endanger their patrons. Seth is watching us live. It's always good to see you, Seth. He said he's never had an Anchor beer. Well, get on it, man. You're running out of time. Okay. When I was reading the story about Carowinds, it seemed like, to me at first, it seemed like they typically acted in good faith, right? Because there was a story about the Department of Labor's Amusement Device Bureau conducting an annual inspection actually on this specific ride in February. They only found a few signage issues, which were quickly corrected. And I'm like, oh, so it seems like everyone's, above board. Mm-hmm. And then if you look into Carowinds' previous history, it's hard to tell whether or not, there's just the inherent risks and dangers of operating an amusement park, or if there's maybe something a little bit more happening behind the scenes. Maybe just like the thrill ride business is as expectedly dangerous as you would think it is. In 2015, a lever malfunctioned on this ride, and it led to riders getting stuck. Not the worst thing. Power outages have stranded riders on rides as well. And in March 2019, a maintenance worker actually lost a hand on the wind seeker. And so, I don't know, this might be more of a smoke and fire situation than, they were doing their best. But I also, not knowing that much about the industry.
Maybe that's average.
Well, I don't know.
Well, we've had 3 safety stories so far. So between Boeing, Pemex, and this one, I'd put this one kind of in the middle. Mm-hmm. Boeing, I don't know if there's much they could have done.
Yeah.
Pemex could have done a lot more.
Yeah, that's
terrible.
terrible.
But these guys may be in the middle.
Yeah, okay. All right. Our most popular story this week. MyPillow auctions assets, downsizes in Minnesota. It started off is a simple dream. Build a better pillow. But now Minnesota-based pillow maker MyPillow has fallen on hard times and is in the pillow fight of its life. Following claims made by company CEO Mike Lindell regarding the 2020 election, retailers and shopping networks stopped doing business with the company, and the CEO says sales fell off a $100 million cliff. Now the company hired JMS Auctions to unload hundreds of pieces of equipment, everything from air compressors and pallet wrappers to packaging equipment and even massage tables. MyPillow is down but not out, and even trying to sublease manufacturing space. Lindell told the Star Tribune the actions against his company were part of a, quote, massive cancellation. Lindell and his company still face multiple lawsuits, including a $1.3 billion defamation lawsuit from Dominion Voting Systems, often the target of Lindell's ire. When MyPillow was forced to shift to more direct sales, the company didn't require the packaging used for traditional retail sales. The Star Tribune says the auction and asset sell-off are likely unrelated to the lawsuits, but Lindell did admit that they've hurt his business. The CEO remains optimistic and says that everything being auctioned off can always be replaced if things bounce back, and the company has also been able to stave off layoffs by moving idled workers to Lindell's other business interests. Anna, a lot going on with this story, but it's hard to believe that the lawsuits didn't impact the business.
Mm-hmm. First of all, the pillow fight of its life, was that?
They are in the pillow fight of their lives.
Was that an original or did you?
I mean, it was my original.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah,
no,
okay.
I liked it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're
point.
down, but not out.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, got
yeah.
it.
Okay.
Yep.
No, I was trying to figure out the episode because early on in the podcast, we had talked about, sort of the ramifications of really polarizing yourself and the associations that you have with your company and how that might really impact your company. And it's really kind of
seems related.
Seems related.
Yeah. So at first I got to say, and it kind of pains me to say this because I think this guy's is sort of a clown, but you have to give him a little credit here for trying to get ahead of this by making some aggressive moves in order to stave off layoffs.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of companies. We covered this on the podcast before. An embarrassing number of companies where they're just kind of business as usual while they're bleeding money, and then
they just people come to a sign in the door.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So on the surface, it's like, well, at least the company's trying to unload some of those assets, free up some cash, move some workers, and they can always ramp back up if the winds shift. That said, though, I do find it hard to believe that the lawsuits have nothing to do with this. And it's my understanding that as a privately held company, of which Lindell, I think, is, if not the sole shareholder, but like the majority controller, like if he loses his rear end here in this case, those shares could go to Dominion, for example, if they won this lawsuit for $1.3 billion in damages that they're going for. A bankruptcy attorney named Eric Snyder, he's from Wilk Oslander LLC, told Insider that if Dominion were to win suit, they basically just file paperwork and they can start seizing the assets of MyPillow, which includes inventory, equipment. So if Lindell wants to prevent that, he probably needs to file bankruptcy if he thinks he's going to lose this lawsuit, at which point he loses all these assets anyway, right? So might as well get some cash for it now. I don't know. It's hard to know his reasoning for sure, but he does have some, I would say, personal interests here. And I'd say if I were a MyPillow employee, I would be looking elsewhere for work because I just don't. I mean, you've got the brand damage is one thing, but these lawsuits are another. And again, they're a big deal here. There's no way you can say that they're not a part of this decision.
I think that if the employees didn't leave when everything started, they're kind of in for the long haul. But Jeff, again, one of the things that we predicted was that you can't be so polarizing and not expect some sort of blowback to happen on your business.
Yeah, and I think what's most frustrating is if that only impacted him personally, that's
Yeah.
his right, but it doesn't. You're impacting, 1,500 jobs here potentially.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard to kind of grab onto this, but this at one point was a $300 million company.
Yeah.
Wow.
So conservatively speaking, they've lost a third of revenues. And that's just from the retailers. We don't know what's happened from a consumer perspective because, like you said, he's taking a very polarizing approach.
Yeah.
That he's also still leveraging or losing like $1 million a month. Whether it's MyPillow money or his money, I'm not really sure. But on all of the fighting the voter fraud concerns that he has, launching this new social media platform, things like that.
Holding events, he's like,
it's all blowback against his company and his product, which is impacting his workers. It's great that he's been able to stave off the layoffs so far, but you have to wonder how long that's really going to last. Now, when it comes to the Dominion lawsuit, rest assured, he's countersuing for $1.6 billion.
Oh,
so
he could come out
he's
300 million
covered.
ahead.
He's got some irons in the fire. He has been planning.
Yeah.
He's got some things figured out. But to go 180 degrees like this guy is gone in terms of his personal standing. I mean, you kind of saw him as a joker, with the infomercials and all that. He was worth like $50 million. The guy was incredibly wealthy.
And a success story, honestly, in
Yeah.
terms of like a former addiction, rags to riches sort of deal.
And it's just, all of that is gone in terms of his personal reputation and everything else with what he's done. Because nobody's going to remember him for his business anymore. It's going to be everything that he's done politically or in the affiliations he's tried to pursue.
Yeah, and it's another reminder of you are free to say and do whatever you want, but those actions have consequences. Seth is not optimistic that he's going to win the defamation suit. Seth just comments he's going to lose the defamation lawsuit, but we'll see. One part of this that was surprising to me was how much the equipment is actually going for. There's 5 days left in the auction. Packaging equipment is going for less than $10.
Oh, wow.
And not knowing,
The equipment or the supplies?
the equipment, some of the packaging equipment is going for less than the massage tables. Like, also, they have a weird amount of massage tables that they're getting rid of. Just
Testing.
Yeah. Oh, but what do they put the pillow in the massage hole?
I don't know.
I don't either. So there, it stands to reason that if you are in a similar business looking for packaging equipment, forklifts, there were even acoustic panels and blankets that I saw on the auction that I was like, for $6 a lot, we could really use those in the studio. Road trip to, what is it, Shakopee, whatever it is up there. Part of this transition also was when he had to move to direct sales, shooting new television commercials, trying to improve his presence through email marketing, radio spots, direct mailing. So he's tried to kind of counteract losing the retail sales and the shopping network money, but it just hasn't translated. And, it's a new business model. He doesn't, you don't need the packaging equipment to make it look pretty to be on a shelf. You need packaging equipment that makes it the most efficient to ship. And that was a lot of the packaging equipment that I saw. It was all like boxing, labeling, printing equipment, a lot of sewing machines. But also a reminder that some of these consignment auction houses could be a good place to pick up equipment.
Absolutely.
I like some of the contract manufacturers that I just know locally, they pick up injection molding equipment, other large capital equipment from these auctions all the time. So.
Yeah, we work with a lot of these guys.
Yeah. So. Okay. All right. Well, before we get started with In Case You Missed It, the stories that weren't as popular on the websites but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward, we have another word from our sponsor, Big Commerce. And we're back. And before we jump into In Case You Missed It, I just want to remind you that Big Commerce provides modern e-commerce technology that works with your existing systems, ERP, OMS, CRM, no problem. Whatever existing business tools and technologies you use today, Big Commerce can integrate using pre-built one-click integrations or customize your automation with its APIs. Make the move to big commerce today. I feel like I'm gonna be sleeping, and my wife's gonna think I'm like talking in my sleep, and I'm just gonna be like, make the move to big commerce today. I do read a lot. I know.
Guerrilla marketing.
Guerrilla marketing. It's in your head, man. Anna, what is your in case you missed it this week?
I selected a story about Elon Musk unveiling a new AI startup. So he has formally launched the artificial intelligence company that he founded to compete with ChatGPT, basically the maker of that, which is OpenAI. It's called XAI, which I think is also the name of one of his children. I don't know.
It's H.
Oh, it's pronounced H?
H.
How's the company name pronounced? XAI or?
Probably.
XI.
Probably like
Shy.
Hex1.
X1.
Yeah.
It's spelled XAI. And its goal is to understand the true nature of the universe. That's like really the way it was explained. There was not much more to it than that.
That's right. To make progress towards their mission. I like it.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Keep it nebulous.
Keep it simple, stupid. And that's the
saying.
Yeah,
that's
the saying.
Yeah.
I didn't invent that.
Yeah, no. It's not an attack.
Yeah. Keep it simple, Alex. Not the same ring to it.
No.
So anyway, this startup has reflected Musk's long voiced concern about the future of AI systems and how they could present some kind of existential risk to humanity. His concept behind this is that an AI that wants to understand humanity is less likely to destroy it. So he's actually trying to like make an effort towards creating, I think, like a moral AI.
Right.
Which
what
is
could go wrong.
What could go wrong? But also very interesting. I mean, like, I don't know, like interesting at the expense of what, but but interesting nonetheless. So I guess he's like making some strides to actually address the concerns that he has. I do have concerns also, and I have been like, appreciative of some of the stances that he's taken on AI and encouraging people to sign these pledges to, keep it.
Stop killer robots.
And like,
unless he makes them.
He pushes for regulatory framework. I think this is an extension of that effort, right? But he has made some weird comments in the past about current chat bots having a liberal bias.
Yep.
And so he wants to produce something that he sees as more truthful. So I don't know. I just like at some point when he's sleeping like 90 minutes a night because he started yet another company that he's going to run, like how is he going to know up from down versus what is the truth? Like I feel like he needs to just take a breather. I don't know.
Because they all fit together. So what's the problem? One of the problems with OpenAI or ChatGPT is the concerns over copyright, right? Because they fed the engine all of these copywritten materials, and now they're starting to face lawsuits. Well, if he can feed his AI direct thoughts from Neuralink, I mean, I don't think you can copyright your thoughts.
That's true.
And it'll be more human because it's coming right from the source.
What if it comes from the monkey tests?
It is. It's Neuralink.
But it's
going to feed this AI engine, which is going to be plugged into Tesla bots, and then we'll never have to work again because everything's going to be taken care of for us, right, guys?
Because he's only going to plug into moral individuals with Neuralink.
Yeah. And it's not going to be liberal. None of that leftist propaganda and his humanoid robots.
Finally.
My goodness. All right. Seth wants us to keep it simple. So, Jeff, keeping it simple. What are your thoughts on Musk having yet another venture? Big swing. Another big swing from Elon.
I think he's got enough going on.
Yeah?
I don't think we need another guy preaching about AI who assumes he's the smartest guy in the room when it comes to developing this stuff and sort of wants to be the universal, rule setter, judge, jury about everything like this.
Yeah.
So I think we got enough people swimming in this pool. I think Elon could maybe bow out of this one.
Well, but it's also, he could definitely bow out, but it's not crazy that when we have a new buzz term where there's money being thrown at it, everyone wants a piece, right?
Well, it's going to be crazy if he's involved. Now, sometimes it's crazy great, okay? But a lot of times it's crazy not so great. And he's got some really amazing things going on that will just continue to influence and structure society for decades, okay, or longer. When you look at Tesla and SpaceX, I just don't understand the need to just like have more stuff going on.
He's just so especially many in this where he's been into the fire.
Well, he's so up and down on even this one. I mean, when you look at robotics and AI and all that stuff, he's all over the place.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think we need him in this one.
But it makes sense that he's been sort of setting the table PR wise to launch this startup because he's been so outspoken about AI. And
David, we know how much you like Elon Musk.
I'm just saying, he's a lot of the things he does make sense and are very calculated. And I mean, this is a logical next step. Let's just hope that maybe he does feed the engine Neuralink thoughts and not like Twitter. Someone's got to read the Twitter terms and conditions and make sure that all of these tweets aren't being like the engine that's going to run XAI, because God help us. Our next story, and in case you missed it, I'll go. Yeah, why not? Because it's the next one. So I'll do that one.
David, you can go now.
I picked a column from Mike Collins, who we've worked with quite a bit in the past. This column was titled "Declining Federal Research is Hurting U.S. Innovation." I pulled this out in particular because he just had a couple of facts in there that I think aren't out there a lot and could really turn some heads when it comes to the way we're trending in terms of American innovation. So this new column by Michael Collins, who is the author of Saving American Manufacturing, which I really enjoyed, as well as a new book called Dismantling the American Dream, How Multinational Corporations Undermine American Prosperity. Haven't read that one, but I think it takes a different tone. Most of us agree that innovation is what's going to keep America ahead of China and other competitors. In 2015, President Barack Obama said, quote, "America's future economic growth and international competitiveness depend on our capacity to innovate. There are two fundamentally different kinds of research that lead to innovation," Collins says. The first is basic research, which is generally conducted by the federal government. The second is R&D, also called applied research, which is generally conducted privately. The U.S. has a long history of investing in federal basic research, going all the way back to World War II, which was used to develop radar, electronics, atomic power, jet fighters, many other technologies. Well, a 2019 study shows that 1/3 of all U.S. patents since 1970 relied on these government-funded research programs. We're talking about transistors, LEDs, MRIs. The list of things that have been created from this basic research is kind of endless. According to the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, the ITIF, if you will, federal basic research has declined 22 out of the last 28 years. As a percentage of GDP, federal research has fallen from a high of 2.5% of GDP in 1964 to just 0.61% in 2016. Collins says that this is a serious red flag, as basic research is the foundation of applied research and fundamental to any innovation strategy. I don't know if you guys had a chance to read this, but Jeff, when it comes to just, we talk about how companies, in order to stay ahead, especially during times of economic downturn, need to continue to invest in R&D and innovation. And sometimes we don't step back and think about how, as a nation, we need to do that as well.
No, I agree. It was a really interesting article. You mentioned a lot of the stats that Mike brought out. The one that caught my eye was a different quote here. The U.S. government invests less in R&D compared to the size of the economy than it has in more than 60 years and counting. Mm-hmm. So when you put it in that scope, I mean, that really, even in addition to the numbers that you mentioned there, brings it into context. We do a ton of different stories from DARPA, a lot of other groups out there. So there is a lot of positive research being done, but you're right, there's a gap. Mm-hmm. The biggest issue is, where do we take that money from? We already have these huge debates. We just had a big thing about passing the budget and allowing us to go deeper into debt nationally. Mm-hmm. Where do we get the money from? This has been a place that it's been cut. And I think universally, when you look at any organization, whether it's private, public, government, whatever, that's where you cut. It's research and development always gets the axe first, because that's about what we might do, not about what needs to be addressed in this moment potentially. Yeah. So it is an easy place to cut, but it does sound like we do need to make some of those tough decisions if we're going to continue to be competitive on a global scale. Yeah. Look at the things that are going on with hypersonic weapons. There's all this development that's going on now in the U.S. Where did it come from? because China started it first, because we're afraid of what Russia's doing, as opposed to really taking the lead. That's just one example. But if you look at all these other things in terms of smart energy, whether it's military or private, whatever the case may be, being out front is a better place to be than trying to play catch up.
No, agreed. And we talk about these DARPA programs all the time, and maybe I just see those as like bigger swings, you know, when we're talking about like hypersonic X-planes and stuff like that. Maybe a lot of that ties into the basic research that will be part of this fundamental base that we could use for innovation going forward. But when he's listing some of the very basic programs that kind of laid the foundation for, let's say, LEDs, I think sometimes we get removed from like the simple things that you have to do to set a foundation for innovation in the future.
Yeah. And what's scary to me too is when you think about how many innovations there are out there that the payback on them isn't great, say from a cash standpoint, but for the environment, for example, it's incredible, right? So who is investing in that kind of research if not the federal government? You know, like that's the kind of stuff that stuff just doesn't happen if you don't have somebody who's like putting in money to make sure that it does, because it's not like a pharmaceutical that you're going to pay yourself back for down the road, like 10,000%, you know? So, you know, we see this locally too, like, you know, state budgets being passed where they're gutting funding for public universities. And so much of that stuff happens there, right? Yeah. So, you know, a lot of that stuff, you just have to consider what the long-term ramifications are from, you know, as you guys were discussing, a competitive standpoint, a national security standpoint, an environmental standpoint. You know, people live in longer lives because they have access to an MRI machine. You know, there's just so much there that it's not just a matter of like checking a box on a budget document or line item veto or something like that. You just have to think about what that all means together. Yeah.
It's good that Wisconsin lawmakers can politicize the importance of needing engineering, because, you know, that's a politically hot topic. We don't need that. Some of the other stats I just wanted to pull out. According to the ITIF, to match the research levels that we were at in the 1980s, it would require an increase by about 80% or $100 billion a year. So, you know, sometimes it's a good reminder that if you kind of let it fall down and go a little bit, that to kind of bridge that gap, it becomes more and more difficult. The federal report, Rising Above the Gathering Storm Revisited, said that the U.S. appears to be on a course that leads to a declining standard of living for our children and grandchildren. That report also concluded that without a renewed effort to bolster the foundations of our competitiveness, we can expect to lose our position. I guess this is just my plea to people to read this column because, in my opinion, Michael Collins' insight is typically invaluable, but also maybe think twice in terms of when some of those budget conversations happen, and think about at a fundamental level how that might be actually helping us rather than just creating the sort of politicking and infighting that goes around it. Jeff, what is your, in case you missed it this week?
So I picked a story that says FDA is looking into an energy drink with caffeine equal to 6 cans of Coke or 2 Red Bulls. Yeah, so usually I don't agree too much with Chuck Schumer, but I can get behind him a little bit on this one.
That's too much?
Yeah. An influencer-backed energy drink that has earned viral popularity among children is facing scrutiny from lawmakers and health experts over its potentially dangerous levels of caffeine. Chuck Schumer, he's the one he called out. He's asking the FDA to basically look into Prime, which some of you may know is associated with, I guess he's a social media superstar, Logan Paul.
Yes, he is a popular person.
So basically, this is his brand. He's pushing it out there, and they're saying, well, look, it says right on the can, nobody under 18 should drink this.
It says it on the can.
So that's what they're marketing it towards. But at the same time, who's watching Logan Paul? A very prominent member or group of his audience is going to be kids under 18, okay? Who are watching him on YouTube or following him on Instagram and everything else. So I do agree. I mean, usually I'm saying government, keep your hands off stuff, but I think being more aware of a product that health officials are worrying about creating anxiety issues, digestive issues, heart problems potentially, should maybe be getting a little bit more involved to make sure it is very explicitly clear that Prime is not good if you're under 18. It's probably not good for anybody if it's got the equivalent of 6 cans of soda in there or 2 Red Bulls, depending on how long you're drinking it for. I don't know. What I thought was also kind of funny is it comes in these neon cans. They promoted it as 0 sugar and vegan. Because that makes it healthier.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it has 6 times the level of caffeine
it's meatless,
as a soda.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that.
It's a vegan beverage, all natural vegan beverage.
I think the takeaway for me here is, man, you really have to look at these labels a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't even have a problem with Logan Paul trying to make a buck off selling a product. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
But consumer beware, maybe in situations like this, is even to a more heightened level. With a lot of these products, just taking a look and making sure you know what your kids are getting into, I guess. And you wouldn't think you'd need to with something that's coming in an aluminum can. But, yeah, you do.
I mean, I was actually just having a conversation with one of my new neighbors about this, about how sometimes labeling is deceiving. Because I was drinking one of those the bubbler seltzers, and I didn't know those were caffeinated.
They are?
Yeah, apparently they are caffeinated. Oops. And he was like, yeah, totally switched from coffee. I'm like, wow, you got off caffeine. That's fantastic. He's like, oh, no, it's in here. Like, had no idea. I had a similar situation with Water Joe in college. I was just like, this is a bottle of water, and I feel great. And they're like, no, there's a ton of caffeine in here. Jeff, I completely agree with you. And there was actually news came out today that Health Canada recalled Prime because it is actually over the country's acceptable caffeine limit of 180 milligrams per serving. It's
a lot.
If anyone's overdone it on caffeine, that's just a place nobody wants to be. It's a sad and lonely place, and it takes a while to come out. Anna, your thoughts on Prime maybe getting, shut down a little bit. Or not shut down, but people telling the warnings about it.
Yeah, I mean, in America, we do a pretty poor job of regulating food and supplements and chemicals. Yeah. I personally think like more needs to be done here to protect consumers from some of these ingredients, or at least from a labeling standpoint. This needs to be, if it's not supposed to be drunk by somebody under 18, then it should be regulated thusly, right? Like there's plenty.
Don't sell it to people under 18.
Yeah, like you should have to show ID or something, I guess.
And the thing is, because it's tied to a social media influencer, and because social media is the main way in which it's marketed, it's targeting directly to those individuals who showed interest in anything Logan Paul or something affiliated with that I don't know, whatever you want to call it, interest, lifestyle, whatever. So it's definitely being pushed at people who should not be drinking it.
Yeah.
So.
But it also shows the weight of some of these influencers. It's not just Logan Paul. It's another YouTube influencer called KSI that kind of got together to make this brand. And how, we see people with that are very popular try to align with brands and it falls down. This is a case of that being successful with a new product launch. And maybe if he just dialed it back a little bit, like dialed it back 20 milligrams a can. It's just, I don't understand. You can't tell me that there are 2 Red Bulls in this drink and then you can convince me that's necessary.
But that's like the go to market, is that it's so extreme, right? So that's the point of it. And
I don't have a problem. Put whatever you want in your product as long as it's legal.
Really, Jeff? Put whatever you want in your product.
But you have to make sure it's clear. And the way that you market it does need to be regulated.
Put whatever you want in your product. Jeff does not care.
Hey, as long as you're upfront about it.
Put a rooster in it. Jeff does not care.
No, just tell me first.
There's a rooster in, what was it, Bojangles? That's Bojangles' rooster seltzer.
But you knew that right by looking at it.
That's like, it's not a chicken place, it's a rooster place?
It's a rooster place. Yeah, they only sell fried rooster. All right. Well, let's move on to our final thoughts before we get out of here. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
You know what? I don't have anything to share, David.
Sounds good.
Glad you came to me first. I wasn't going to use that time to try to come up with something at all.
No, that's good. You know what? I read my notes wrong. Anna, what's your final thought?
I'm done podcasting this week. We did 2 this week. I was a guest on the Industrial Talk podcast this week, which was super fun. Scott McKenzie, he's got a great podcast. If you can check it out, we'll be promoting it on our sites next week as well. But it was super fun. So, but now I need a break. I'm going to lose my voice, I think.
Yeah, we need honey and tea for the panel. Jeff, I mean, it might not be your final thought, but you were just interviewed for another one as well.
I was on that tech pod, talked about cybersecurity, Industry 4.0, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was a good time.
Excellent. My final thought this week is that do your due diligence when you move, because it's possible that if you move to a new community, the company that did both gas and electricity only does gas in your new community, and that you don't even know that there's a new electric provider, and said electric provider, without ever communicating with you, could just show up at your house one day and cut the power. And then when you go to explain to them this very harmless situation, or not harmless, but like how it happens, and that you have small children, and they still respond to you by saying, sorry, it's going to be next business day. Just make sure you do your due diligence. So, I mean, I'm not saying that happened to me yesterday. I just don't want to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else. So,
great guidance, David.
Yeah. It's also, so when I finally got home yesterday, in this hypothetical situation, I hypothetically saw the piece of paper that was hanging on the door, and there are 2 checkboxes, right? One checkbox is a warning that says, by checking this box, we are letting you know that your power will be shut off tomorrow if you don't do anything. And then under that is another checkbox that just says, no, we cut it. We cut it today at this time. And it's just, it boggles my mind that an energy company that can clearly see that somebody's living in the residence can just come without any other notice and cut your power.
No, normally this would be where I make a joke about you moving over, getting past things and moving past it, but I'm actually with you. That was ridiculous. I was mad for you yesterday.
No, it was, I actually said that.
Hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically. In this hypothetical situation, when I hypothetically got home, I hypothetically talked to my wife, and I'm like, man, even Jeff agreed. So I feel like I'm 100% on this one.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
All right. Well, for trivia, last week we had no winner. We had a lot of big swings and everybody missed, except, of course, producer Alex, who nailed it before we even left. Hopefully you guys went home with a koozie. But none of the listeners got it right. The question was, match the car manufacturer with the song that mentions it in the lyrics. The cars were Cadillac, Chevy, Chrysler. The songs were Boys of Summer, Thunder Road, and Short Skirt Long Jacket. And the pairs were in that order: Cadillac, Boys of Summer, Chevy, Thunder Road, Chrysler, Short Skirt, and a long jacket. This week, match the company with the Major League Baseball team uniform they have appeared on this season. So be the first person to email the correct answer to myself, David@IEN.com, and win yourself a Today in Manufacturing can koozie, hot off the presses. So the companies are Marathon, Quikrete, and Motorola. The teams, the Major League Baseball teams, are the San Diego Padres, the Cleveland Indians, and the Atlanta Braves. Match the company with the team uniform they've appeared on. Get yourself a Today in Manufacturing can koozie.
Sweet.
I know.
That's a good one. Well done, Nolan.
Yes. Oh, sorry. By resident trivial expert. By resident expert in trivia, Nolan Beilstein. Thank you, Nolan. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review in whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join Seth, Jesse, and everybody else that joins us live every Thursday. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.